some opening remarks, and then after Tom does his presentation, I'll have some closing remarks. But I want to be fully transparent as to what happened with the money over the last 3 or 4 years. So what we inherited, I stand before you today not to sugarcoat a bitter pill, but to offer you the honesty that you were promised for me. We faced big financial challenges that were kept hidden from you, but now here at our doorstep. The purpose of tonight's presentation is not to propose a new city budget. That will come in March. But to explain to you, our citizens and taxpayers, the truth about the state of our city's fiscal health. We will be conducting budget workshops according to a schedule that will be announced, inviting full public view and input. But that is for another day. That's coming down the road. Tonight we are assembled to hear the facts and to learn the truth. We recently commissioned a professional CAT scan of our city's finances conducted by Mr. Thomas Hamilton, who is an expert with 40 years of municipal experience. Tom has been hard at work since early December, examining every facet of our municipal finances. His long and respected service as a municipal and educational finance director in Connecticut, including a stint several years ago helping West Haven work through a similar challenge, is analogous to bringing in a renowned medical specialist to examine a sick patient. His examination is ongoing, but he has completed enough of his analysis to issue a report to me, to the Board of Aldermen, and to you, the people of Ansonia. The results are sobering. So now I would like to introduce Mr. Thomas Hamilton, who will share his findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay. My name is Thomas Hamilton, and as the Mayor indicated, I have more than 40 years of experience in municipal finance and school finance within the state of Connecticut. At the CFO level, I've worked for several of the larger municipalities in the state of Connecticut. As the Mayor indicated, I've also worked for the city of West Haven a number of years ago when they went through their first financial crisis. I was brought in as the finance director back then. So I have experience both with AAA, highly rated municipalities and with distressed municipalities. In addition, I have served in the past. I was the chair of the State Municipal Finance Advisory Commission, the MFAC Commission. Ansonia was recently placed under MFAC oversight, and I currently serve on what's called the MARB, or the Municipal Accountability Review Board for the state of Connecticut, which oversees more significantly distressed municipalities. More recently, I've been doing consulting after retiring from CFO roles, and so that is what brings me here to Ansonia. So my scope of service that I was retained to look into consists of the following items. One, assess the city's financial policies, practices, and procedures, and then to evaluate how those policies, practices, and procedures may differ from best practice, best industry practice. So I'm going to be providing recommendations to the mayor on areas where the city can improve its financial policies, improve financial practices, improve financial procedures. I'm also assisting the mayor with the preparation of the upcoming city operating budget, as well as doing financial forecasting for the city. I'm assessing organizational structure of the finance department and making some recommendations for improvements in terms of staffing and needs within the finance department. And then I'm going to be, or I am assisting with recruitment and selection of a new full-time CFO and helping mentor finance staff. So some of the areas that identified already that will be part of the larger report that I'll be presenting to the mayor later, but areas where I believe the city can make improvements within its existing practices include things like multi-year budgeting. It's not something that the city has really taken very seriously in the past, and I think multi-year budgeting would be an important step to understand, what's going to happen not just in the upcoming budget, but in future budgets. Also, doing forecasting of your financial results of operation. Instead of waiting for an audit to be completed, really the city needs to do a better job of forecasting where you think you're going to end the year. And so that would be the kinds of things that I'm thinking about recommending going forward. So what are some of the preliminary budget observations? And really these are observations that feed directly into the preparation of next year's operating budget, which is why these observations need to get out now, because they really need to be factored into the development of next year's operating budget. So first and foremost, what I've found essentially is there is a really pretty major structural imbalance between revenues and expenditures. And so what do I mean when I say structural imbalance? Essentially what I mean is that you are spending more than you're taking in, that you're not collecting sufficient revenue to cover your ongoing regular operating expenses, and that you're using the resources from one-time asset sales to balance your operating budget. And you've been doing that for 3 years running. And unfortunately, the city is now approaching the time when those funds are running out. And you're going to have to do something different. That strategy is not going to work, or not going to work much longer, that's for sure. I've indicated here on the slide, the $41 million from the sale of the WPCA has now been essentially fully exhausted. It's gone. Now, on a more positive note, the city does still have a positive general fund balance. You're not in a deficit, so that certainly counts as so at least you're not in a current fund balance deficit. But your general fund balance has now reached the point where it would not be reasonable to make further drawdowns on that fund balance. It's really reached a level that it needs to stay there. Or potentially be better if it went up a little bit. The other major issue that affects your budget next year, and this one really came as a pretty big surprise to me, is this fuel cell project. I think you're familiar with the fact that the city has undertaken an effort to develop a fuel cell in Ansonia, and that project has suffered very significant delays, and those delays have serious financial implications for the city, actually both in the current year as well as next year's budget. And I've got more slides and we'll be talking further about the fuel cell, but that is certainly one of the major challenges, financial challenges the city faces, is dealing with the fallout from the fuel cell and trying to put that project back together. And finally, I've noted that the city has also undertaken solar projects that have been completed and is waiting for federal investment tax credits on those projects, and perhaps more importantly, the fuel cell project also relies on $11 million of anticipated investment tax credits. And with the changes in Washington, that would certainly be a concern about whether or not those tax credits are going to be there, particularly the solar tax credits are not going to be there at some point, in the very near future. And so the city needs to move very aggressively to capture those tax credits while they're still available, and to take steps to identify if those tax credits will be available going forward for the fuel cell. So looking forward to next year, the 26-27 revenue shortfall is really caused by past financial practices. So those past financial practices, as I've already alluded to, is using one-time asset sales to support ongoing annual operating expenses. And doing that is inherently unsustainable and is really an unsound financial practice. The best practice, if you have one-time financial resources, the best practice is to match those one-time resources with one-time expenses. So the best practice would be to say, we've realized $41 million of one-time revenue, we're going to use it to pay down debt, or we're going to use it to finance future capital projects, infrastructure improvements, or we're going to use it for economic development projects that will grow the city's tax base in the future. Things like that would be considered responsible uses of one-time assets. Using the money to balance your budget, it inevitably results in this financial cliff. And so at some point, you're looking at the cliff and you're saying, okay, now what do I do? And that's kind of where the city is. So now, with that said, if you are going to use one-time resources to support an operating budget, it is critically important that you do it in what I'll say is a responsible way. Still, the best practice is to use it for one-time expenses, but if you're going to use it to support the operating budget, it's really important that you do it over a multi-year period, that you don't, in this case, the city budget last year was 20% of the tax levy was essentially supported from this one-time asset sale. So 20% of the operating budget was being supported by one-time revenues. That simply is too much. So going up to that level of drawdown in any one year is too much. And then you need to, if you're going to do it, you need to structure it so that you have small incremental amounts that you step down each year, and that you've prepared a multi-year operating budget projection so you know clearly how it's going to affect your mill rates, how it's going to affect your budget, how it's going to affect your fund balance over the next 3 to 5 years. So the fuel cell, as I indicated, the fact that the fuel cell has not progressed, the fuel cell is not operational. It has caused problems both in the current fiscal year and next fiscal year. So the current fiscal year, 25-26, the city had built into its budget an anticipated revenue of $1.6 million as revenue. It was listed as a fuel cell pilot payment. It was revenue that was anticipated from electricity sales on the fuel cell. Unfortunately, fuel cell is not operational. There's no electricity being produced. There's no revenues to support the budget. So that creates another hole in the current year budget, and it makes that cliff that the city is facing next year that much higher. Now, despite the fact that the city included $1.6 million of revenues that don't exist in the budget from the fuel cell, the city did not include in the budget the other side of that transaction, which is the debt service. The city in December of 2004 issued $37 million worth of what's called certificates of participation, debt. And that debt service was structured such that the first debt service payment was due in December of 2025, this year, a month ago. $695,000 of debt service was paid in December of this year, there was no money included in the budget for that debt service. So that's another budget shortfall that has to be taken into account in the current fiscal year as well as in next fiscal year. So where does that leave you overall? And I have a slide that will kind of summarize these numbers, but where it leaves you overall is essentially just to cover these major budget gaps, if you will. Just to cover these gaps that I've talked about, you would need to raise your tax levy next year by 26%. So again, what is that 26%? This WPCA sale proceeds, the budget in the current year included $5,250,000 from the sale of WPCA. The available resources have now been exhausted, so that money is not available next year. They included the use of fund balance from your general fund of $548,000. If that was the only use of fund balance, the only drawdown, I would say, well, that's not that big a deal, but it gets added to the number because, again, I don't believe your fund balance can take another drawdown next year of another $548,000. And then we have the fuel cell revenue that is not going to come in this year, and that's not going to come in next year. And then next year, I had mentioned the debt service this year is about I believe 1.7 million. Next year's debt service on the fuel cell, principal and interest, is just over $3 million. So you add all those numbers together, you come up with $10.4 million. That's 26% of your current tax levy. So essentially, to bring your budget back into balance without doing anything like, covering labor contracts or inflation or health insurance increases or any of those other normal things that are in the budget, but just to cover those items, that's a 26% increase in your tax levy. So I'm going to drill down a little bit more into the WPCA sale proceeds. And again, I think I've covered a number of these items, but I have a schedule that will also show you these, the points I'm making here. But this is essentially how the funds were used. And nearly all of the proceeds are gone at this point, but it was used to support the general fund in an unsustainable way. It was used to fund limited capital projects, including the solar carport, and I don't take, real exception to funding capital projects with it. It was used to retire the WPCA debt, which again, I don't take exception to that. And then it was used to establish a WPCA rate stabilization fund to try to hold down the WPCA rates. And I think you can make an argument that that was a reasonable thing to do. But it was really the use in the last 3 years to support the general fund budget that was not appropriate. And so the city used in fiscal year 23-24, was actually before the sale was actually fully consummated, there was a $5 million deposit that was paid by Aquarian, and that $5 million was used to balance the budget in fiscal year 23-24. In 24-25, the city built in the use of $7.4 million to balance the budget, and then in the current year, 25-26, the city used $5,250,000 to balance the budget. And using such large amounts of money to support the annual budget, again, it's unsustainable, and it's created this large fiscal cliff for you for next year. Last point I do want to make, there is one remaining pocket of funds, if you will, and that is the residual funds that remain in the WPCA enterprise fund. So the WPCA, prior to its sale, if you go back to the audit report of June of 2004, the audit shows that there was $9.5 million of what's called net assets available. So unrestricted net assets were available in the WPCA fund. Now, the amount has dropped a bit because the WPCA was operated for the first 6 months of the year by the city, and there weren't bills issued for those operating expenses that year. So there were some need to draw down, but there is still an available balance that is approximately $9 million residual balance from the WPCA, and that is really the final source of any significant funding for the city. And I would say because of the fuel cell debt service and the fuel cell, the revenue that is not going to be realized this year, I expect that this year the city is likely to run $2 million this year. That should really come off of that 9 million, which brings you down to perhaps maybe an available balance in the range of 7 million. So again, this just lays out in table form how the WPCA funds have been used. The $5 million deposit, which was used in 23-24, the 7.4 million in 24-25, the 5.2 million in the current year, the solar carport project at 2.4 million, capital projects 375,000, repayment of WPCA debt, these two items at 12.9 and 131,000, and then the $7 million for the WPCA rate stabilization fund. So basically, you know, you're down to 465,000. The fund has been, the proceeds from the WPCA sale have now been essentially fully exhausted. So to dive in a little deeper on the fuel cell project. So that was a project intended to construct a fuel cell generating 3.9 megawatts of electricity, and would be located on city property. And the original plan had it operational by December of 2025. The city issued $37 million of certificates of participation, which is a debt, $37 million worth of debt in December of 2024 to finance the project under a lease arrangement. So as originally structured, or as originally planned, I should say, it's my understanding that the city was essentially going to be the landlord of this project and collect rent. And somewhere along the way, the city made a decision to change vendors that the city was, partners that the city was working with, and really to change the structure of this development. And the way the structure was changed, I would say, was putting the city in the role more of a at-risk energy developer. You know, now presumably the financial return to the city under that alternate arrangement would have been or would be greater, because you would realize, the intention, I guess, was that you were going to realize, you know, all the revenue from the sale of the electricity and not just rental income from lease of property. Essentially what's happened at this point is the project has been delayed by issues over lack of necessary site control and that change in approach. And so the prior vendor that the city was working with was granted, as I understand it, an exclusive right to develop a fuel cell on this particular site. and that right is still active and in place for some time now, going into the future, at least until December of 2026, and maybe longer, I don't know. So that has prevented the vendor that the city is now working with, and frankly has prevented the city from moving forward with this fuel cell project on this site. So in the state of Connecticut, the State Siting Council exercises regulatory oversight over these kinds of projects. And the State Siting Council approved the prior vendor's application for this site, not the current vendor's application for this site. So where we are now, as I've already indicated, essentially is you've got revenue that you had anticipated in the current fiscal year. That says 25, should say 25, 26, not 25, 25. You've got revenues in the current year that are not being realized. You've got debt service in the current year that was not budgeted and is projected at $1.7 million this year, and next year that debt service is projected at $3 million. So where do you go from here? That's the most important question. You know, it's important to understand how you got to where you are, but really more important is to try to put together a plan going forward that gets you, out of the problem as best you can and moves the city forward in a positive way. Because at the end of the day, you on the Board of Aldermen, that's what you were elected to do, was to help govern the city going forward. So it is important to understand how you got there, but it's also important not to dwell incessantly on the past, because ultimately what you do in the future is what matters most. So, working assumption is that a 26% increase in taxes is not viable, that's just more than people can support, and that you need to develop a plan that brings that number down, as much as you can. It's also clear that continuation of past practice and business as usual is also not an option. That the cliff is now, you're at the top of the cliff now, and you just simply don't have the luxury of saying, let's just keep drawing down on $41 million, because the $41 million doesn't exist anymore. It's already all been used. So what do we recommend? What we recommend is really an all-inclusive strategy that uses all of the tools available in the finance toolbox. So that means expenditures, doing everything you can to reduce expenditures. It means revenues, doing everything you can to increase non-tax revenues. It means state aid and doing everything you can to try to bolster state aid. It means looking at asset sales to figure out, are there any underutilized properties that you could sell that could help bring in resources. It means looking at this fuel cell project and figuring out what is the best way forward on that. So I'll walk through some of the things that we are looking at now, and this is really what this is really doing is helping to lay the groundwork for the mayor's operating budget that will be coming out fairly soon, and to have people on the same page with some level of understanding of what the city is facing, so that you aren't shocked by tax increases that may still be larger than the mayor would have hoped for, and spending being held back in departments and so on that might be less than he would otherwise like to be able to provide departments. So what we said on the expenditure side, reduce or eliminate all non-essential spending. So identify lower priority items where services can be scaled back or services can be eliminated. identify more efficient ways of delivering services through shared services or other strategies. So how can you provide the same services but do it at less cost to the city? Apply across-the-board reductions to city departments, and set a goal of a 0% increase in the city budget and a 0% increase in the locally funded Board of Education budget. And that is hard to do because of labor contracts and health insurance costs and other expenses. Getting to a 0 is no small feat. It can be pretty tough. But we think it's a reasonable objective given what you're facing. So on the revenue side, we think the city should certainly seek additional financial support from the state of Connecticut. And that, would be something that your legislative delegation can assist with, and see whether or not there's any opportunities to increase funding, either to help support your regular operating budget or to support some other items that may be, capital items or other things that may have had to have been cut out of your budget that you can get the state to step forward in to try to support. Increasing local fees and charges and implementing new fees where possible. So one of the things I know we've talked about is solid waste area and whether or not fees can be implemented there. Also conducting a fee comparison with other communities, comparable communities, to look at whether or not your fees are for things like planning fees, planning and zoning fees, and building fees, and fire inspection fees, and so forth, or any of those areas, things that you could potentially increase. So the WPCA Enterprise Fund residual balance, this is again, I've already indicated, is the one remaining pocket of funds that are still available to the city. But it needs to be understood that drawing those funds down, that's a one-time revenue source. And so it's really imperative that if you are going to use that to help, one of the things I like to talk about when I talk about the financial cliff is using those one-time sources can help lower you down from that cliff a little bit more gradually than jumping off it all at once. But again, it's important that you do it as part of a multi-year operating plan so you know what the impact is, and you do it in a step-down way over multiple years. Asset sales, sale of vacant property or underutilized property could help bolster the resources available to the city. So that's something that I think is worth looking at. Again, that does become a one-time revenue source that you need to be cognizant of. And then at the end of the day, you need to increase taxes enough to balance your budget. And I understand there's a referendum requirement. If your tax increase is greater than 3%, you have to go to referendum. But to me, it looks like even if you do all the other things you can on the expenditure side and everything you can do on the revenue side, I think you're likely going to be north of 3%. So with respect to the fuel cell, the recommendation is to seek a negotiated solution with the vendors to put the project back on track. We have some hope that that may be possible. The mayor is actively working on that. At this point, there's no guarantees, but we are hopeful that it will be possible, we hope, to put that project back together. And then in the interim, what I would suggest is some sort of short-term financing to bridge that gap. This is not an ideal solution, mind you. That this would be some kind of taxable financing, because you can't use tax-exempt debt to pay debt service. But given the situation you're in, I think if you knew at the point that that bond was structured, if you knew it was going to take more than a year to get the project up and operational, if you thought it was going to take 2 years or 3 years, well, then you certainly would have structured that debt repayment in a way that you didn't have any payments until the project was operational. So I think that's the rationale for saying it's appropriate to consider a short-term financing to push that into the future while the project is being put back on track. Now, if the project can't be put back on track and that it just turns out it's impossible, then you have to come up with another solution. But right now, the best solution looks to be work as hard as you can to get that project back on track, get it producing electricity, and push off the debt service impact until that project can be brought back on track. And again, I think I've reiterated this point 100 times, but use any revenues from non-recurring sources, whether it's the WPCA fund closeout, federal investment tax credits on solar projects that could come in and would generate some additional revenue to the city, asset sales, et cetera, in a responsible way over a multi-year period to help bring that projected tax increase down to something that's more palatable. So in conclusion, Ansonia faces a large structural imbalance between revenues and expenditures caused by decisions made in prior years. To close the imbalance in its entirety would require a 27% increase in the tax levy. And in order to avoid that 27% increase in the tax levy, we recommend this multifaceted, multi-year strategy to close the budget gap. And again, reduce spending to the lowest level possible, seeking to achieve 0% increase in the city budget for next year and 0% increase in locally funded education expenses, increase non-tax revenues wherever possible, pursue increases in state aid, seek to put the fuel cell project back on track, and defer the 2027 budgetary impact in the meantime through a short-term financing, pursue asset sales where possible to increase financial flexibility, and then use non-recurring revenues in a responsible way, and finally, raise the property taxes by an amount necessary to restore budgetary balance. That's how you get there. So I think that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to take questions, I guess, from elected officials. This is not a public hearing, and there is going to be plenty of opportunity. This is obviously also not a budget presentation. This is really the precursor to the budget process. So there will be opportunities, as I understand it, during the budget process later for public input and public comment. But if there are questions from the Board of Aldermen, I'm certainly happy to try to answer those.
Yes, this presentation is going to be characterized. You want me to take it? I can take that. This presentation will be characterized by some as having a partisan perspective. What can you tell us about your background that'll alleviate those concerns?
Well, I mean, what I can say is I'm not a politician. I'm a finance professional. Spent my career working in municipal government and also on the education side in several of the larger municipalities in the state of Connecticut. So, you know, this is my best projection of essentially what's happened in the city of Ansonia and how you find yourself in the situation you find yourself in, and then my best projections of the steps you can take to help get yourself out of this situation. No, I'm not a politician. I've never run for office and don't consider myself a political actor.
Tyler Bennett here. Quick question so multifaceted, multi-year, have you guys, I'm assuming have discussed what a tax increase year over year for the next 3 to 5 years should or would look like?
No, we're not there yet. We're just trying to give you a background of what happened the last several years, why your taxes were kept low, and now there's no money there.
Yeah, no, understood.
But we can't do a projection because we're not there yet. It took us months to get through all the mess to get to this point. I have a budget that's almost done for next year. Planning and all that, that's the next steps. Tom's gonna help us with that. We're gonna do that, but we're not near that. This is a lot of work, folks. It's not what happened. It took months to figure all this stuff out. We had to go through all the sheets, balances, and all that thing, so it's not one of those things. But we will do that. I'll let Tom talk to this, but a good city does a 5-year capital plan. We've never done that. We haven't had a Board of Education budget in 5 years, which is by law. We haven't had that. So these are the things we're unearthing. And I don't have the answers today. I'm stuck in the mud right now. I'm not stuck. I'm working hard and we're moving it forward. But you need to know what happened. No budgets for the Board of Ed, overspending for the last 3-4 years. Like Tom said, instead of taking that $41 million, say, okay, $3 million this year, $2 million next 1 year. What do we need to do? Cut the budgets and increase revenue. None of that stuff happened.
Yeah, no, understood. And I mean, I guess it ultimately makes sense why they were trying to do 13% in May last year to cover, I guess.
I don't want to discuss. I'm not here for the politics. I'm here to let you people know what happened.
Rohan Ram. I know this is a quick overview as far as the current and ongoing. In the larger revision, will there be a how did we get here to ensure that we don't make the same mistakes? So I know, like, we're in debt. Where did the debt come from? There's some things that are very clear, but then the other parts are not necessary. So I'm curious to know, is that something that's going to be a part of it or just not?
I'll answer that. The charter was changed to allow the Board of Aldermen to adopt the budget. Now, I don't know who looked at that budget, but before, we had a Board of Apportionment Taxation that looked at every line item in the budget. And guess what? That's what we're doing now. I have different people in-house. We're going back to the old way of doing it. When you talk about partisan politics, the head of the Board of Apportionment Taxation, the chairman, is a Republican. So that's why I'm standing here. I'm part of you. I'm not playing the partisan politics game. I'm telling you what happened. And we're in trouble, and I'm trying to get us out of the hole. That's what you need to know. I think I have more people on different boards that are Republican or Democrats or unaffiliated. So it's not about politics. It's about getting the best people we can on boards. So that partisan stuff, I don't believe in that. When I ran for mayor, I knocked on a lot of doors. People said, "What are you, Democrat or Republican?" And I jokingly used to say, "I'm the folks party." And I said, "I'm for you. I'm an Ansonia. I'm for the people of Ansonia." So that's why we're having this presentation. That's why I hired Tom. We're going to figure this out. I'm going to have closing remarks after all the questions. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes. We're trying to get this resolved. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know if I did or not. Yes, we're going to, that's going to send out tonight, right? That's tomorrow. Andrew? Yeah, Andrew, yes. I have Beth on my sheet, so I assume it was Beth. Okay. All right, Beth, it's not you.
Thanks, Beth.
Good job, Beth.
project and everything. One, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mayor Frank, as well. I'm happy that, this is sobering night, but I'm happy that we're at least getting to address these. So I just want to make, I guess, more of a point first. Just trying to clarify that what we're talking about right now, when you're putting this perspective of $10.4 million, right, for a shortfall, these actions are to basically recoup that, right, get to a 0%, correct, right?
It's to bring the budget back into balance, to balance revenues and expenditures.
Yeah, so when we're talking about these actions, residents won't see a more so direct effect on city operations right now, an increase in any services, because we can't have that, correct? So it's more of stabilization. I just want to put it in perspective for us all, because that's the situation. We didn't get here overnight, obviously. It's been over years. So this is an effort now to recoup where we can, or stabilize how we can.
I don't know if it's recoup, I think it's more stabilize.
Stabilize.
Because we can't fix the problem overnight.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna talk about a few things we're gonna do, but not all the things we're gonna do.
Okay. And then we mentioned the fund balance. It's not in a, it's not depleted, right? But
That's correct.
where it's at with other municipalities, I know even in our charter, we have a minimum amount that kicks in that we actually have to have plans for our fund balance, right, I believe. For other municipalities, like of our size, what would be best practices for use of that, right? Because obviously, it was being used, as you said, to really keep the mill rate low. So what would be best practices, in your opinion, that you've seen before?
It's really same thing as the using proceeds from asset sales, that it's a one-time revenue source. If your fund balance is over the amount that the rating agencies want to see and that good financial practice says that you would need, then the balance that's over that amount would best be used for one-time, matched with one-time expenses. So capital expenses, infrastructure, economic development initiatives, or things like that would be the most appropriate use of fund balance if you had more fund balance than was necessary. Now, at this point, I think your fund balance is at a level that it doesn't make good financial sense to draw it down any further. I'm talking your general fund balance at this point.
And with that one, or that leads me into what we talked about of the residual funds from the WPCA sale, right? So we talked about best practices. If you were getting one-time revenue, it would be applying that to a one-time expenses that you could allocate those to, right? Match them up with. So what you suggested right now, and what would be kind of like a viable thing, is us using that for something like the fuel cell project, right? Because that's not necessarily the same as what was being done with a lot of these funds, not applying them to one-time uses. This is a project in general.
Well, let me say a couple things. One,
Yeah.
best practice on the use of the one-time asset sale proceeds would be using those for one-time expenses. And I agree, you could say fuel cell would be part of that. However, with that said, as I indicated in my presentation, you're now at the top of this financial cliff. And because of the fact that you're at the top of this cliff, your choices are kind of limited. You can jump off the cliff and say, we're just going to increase taxes as much as we have to balance the budget, and that's it, we're done. And that's a solution, but it's not one that people are going to be particularly happy with. And what I've suggested here is, given the fact that the past actions have placed you at the top of this cliff, you can use those funds that are available from the WPCA residual to help lower yourself down from the cliff, essentially. And I think that's gonna be the course of action that you're going to need to take, simply because of the fact that this 26% cliff that you're on is just too high, and it's too much to try to just throw at people all at once. So,
Thank you. And we talked a little bit about risk in there as well. And I also think with the fuel cell project as well. I know back in 2024, we had to downgrade. What now if we don't have a turnaround, right? What other risks does the city assume?
I'm not quite sure I know where you're going with that question.
So we were already downgraded, from the S&P, our credit rating and everything, right?
You were put on negative, what's called negative watch, and you're still on negative watch. And, you know, I'm not sure, you know, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it.
Because from my understanding, it also means that could affect other projects that we put ourselves into, and increase the amount of debt service that we could potentially have in those
It could,
projects.
but you're getting ahead of yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, it could.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
to
that's-
say,
Yeah.
we need to have a turnaround, but
Yeah.
I'll stop with my questions now.
Yeah, we've got to make our bond payments, or we're negatively affected.
So it's a serious thing that we actually need
Oh, yeah, it's
to make
serious,
sure
yeah.
that we're working on.
I don't think I said anything wrong, right, Tom?
No.
Yeah.
Lisa Glazer from the Senate Board. I'm not a finance person, but I do run a business, and I'm just wondering, so our taxes were, and I'm not gonna use the right words, but they were kept lower, even though we were spending more than we were taking in.
Yes.
So, and we all know our taxes have gone up, it's just they haven't gone crazy, gone up. My question to you is, you've got 40 years into this, have you seen a city be in this kind of shape and crawl out of it? Because we're tough, but I'd like to have a little bit of hope in this.
Yeah, I do think there's a way out of this that is reasonable, and I think you can get there. You're gonna have to make some tough decisions, and especially you on the alders will have to make some tough decisions. But, yeah, no, I've seen, when I went into West Haven, and this was, I'm really giving away my age now, but this was back in I guess it was the early 90s. I think their total budget at the time was about $60 million, and they had I believe it was a $20 million deficit. And they were, literally could not pay their bills. They literally, were just holding off paying health insurance vendors and all kinds of vendors because they didn't have any money. And so.
We're not there yet.
You're not there yet.
Okay. See, there's positive, there's a little sunlight.
It's, I just wanna know, how long did it take them to dig out of that?
About 3 years. I was there 3 years. When I got there, their bond rating had been lowered below investment grade by both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. And when I left, it was, I think, back up to an A rating. So,
So we're talking 20 million in 3 years, we're at 10 million, and so there's a good timeline there, 3 to 5? Is that we're looking to get kind of stabilization?
yeah, I mean, it shouldn't really take 5 years. I think, you need to move with some speed and urgency, and I think you can get there over a 3-year period.
I guess my other question is, how much have you seen the state credits actually come as of late to any other cities or municipals? Do you know anything about that? I know with all the changes, it's ugly right now, so.
Yeah, I can't really speak to that.
I don't think any of us can. I mean, the state's willing to help us. But how much, and, I'll mention that. The state is willing to help us.
All right.
But we don't know.
Appreciate your insight.
We don't
Thank you very
know exactly what we're gonna need yet. And, we are gonna talk to them about what we need as far as helping to pay for some of the bond stuff, so that'll be a discussion.
Hi, just a quick one, Patricia DeSilva, Fifth Ward. The debt service that was not included in the city, in the municipal budget, we didn't know what we didn't know. Did you see any other red flags where a bill would come due that we're not aware of? And again, not a finance person, but relying on
Yeah, the
better
debt,
judgment.
the debt service was the big item, that I can
Yeah.
recall off the top of my head. Yep. Yeah, so debt service, the unbudgeted debt service, and then the fact that the revenue on the other side was included in the budget, was also, a pretty big, miss, 1.6 or 1.7 million on the revenue side, and then, another 1.7 million on the expenditure side for debt service, so.
Frank, Frank.
So we're not doing public session.
We're not doing public, no public. Frank, just public, no public, just Board of Aldermen,
We're not having a public session.
just all. I have a question, it's in your vision.
It's just everything in my head, it's just all.
Okay,
I think Frank, you should cover this.
all right, I'm gonna close. I'm
Thank you,
restricted
Tom.
it to Board of Aldermen, there's gonna be a follow-up, I'm gonna close with some remarks. Well, I guess fortunately, Tom's already gone over a lot of them. But I'll start with, we uncovered a massive structural imbalance, and as you said, a fiscal cliff created by several years of unsustainable practices, specifically the WPCA sale. Today, only $465,000 remains. Consecutive budgets that they told us were balanced, they were misleading you and us. They were never balanced to the tune of millions of dollars each year. They sold a major city asset, the Water Pollution Control Authority, as a cash grab to bring in revenue to cover massive fiscal deficits. That asset is gone, and our ability to have a say in our sewer usage and water use rates went with it. So that was a really poor leadership mistake. The fuel cell project. We're facing a $3 million annual debt service project for a project that has gone off the rails under previous management. No revenue to support it. We are now faced with two fuel cell companies, each insisting they should develop the fuel cell project because of the bad decision made by those before us, acting on very poor legal advice. On my very first day in office, I had to approve an invoice. You said $695, Tom? Yeah, I wrote down $698, so, we can argue over $3,000. But the first day I was in office, I had to say, what the hell is this, all right? The budget we are currently operating on includes a line item saying we are receiving $1.3 million from an operating fuel cell project right across from Eagle Hose and below the Armory. So if you find that fuel cell plant or the $1.3 million, please call me, no matter what time, day or night. Phantom revenue. Last year's budget included a $1.6 million phantom payment that simply does not exist. There's no money there. That was supposed to be a rebate. There was no rebate. That's wishful thinking. If we tried to fix this giant mess overnight, it would require as Tom pointed out, a 26% tax increase to balance the books that was left for us. Folks, let me assure you, that's not going to be happening. Let me be clear, it's unacceptable for the working families and seniors of Ansonia. Look at me, I'm a senior. Lead by example. I know many of you are skeptical. I have been too. That's why I ran for office. You've heard promises before, but the days of treating public money like a private piggy bank are over. I have taken action with our department heads, and I'm expecting their full cooperation working to solve the challenges we all face. Department heads, I have instructed each department head to present a budget with a 0% increase, and there I noticed that more cuts may be required. And for those that didn't, like one particular department has a 2.4% increase, it's going to go to Bo. The chairman of Bo is here. I'm sorry it's an open session. We're going to be cutting that budget to 0%. that will be cut. Public Works, I've ordered Superintendent Mike DeLassio, who's here, to find savings, and he has responded with several positive actions. We stopped the practice of allowing contractor fee waste disposal paid for by city taxpayers. Right now, we know we saved $11,000 in the last month and a half. We projected to save $100,000 annually on carting out waste from other people. So, additionally, we changed suppliers for cleaning supplies, and we're gonna see a 20% reduction, and I don't have the numbers yet, but Mike did that as well. And finally, on the public works side, we're paying, the city's paying for the usage of these containers, and according to the contract, we're not supposed to be. And Mike DeLassio pointed out to the lawyer that we should be getting back probably $100,000. So these are things that we're doing, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I have ordered investigations by the Corporation's Counsel's Office in the use of city credit cards and city vehicles for non-city business. The preliminary results of the credit card investigation is, to put it politely, very interesting. When that initial report is thoroughly completed, which we have not done, the results will be released to the public and referred elsewhere if necessary. Corporation Counsel. I've instructed our Corporation Counsel's office to achieve a savings of at least 10% from their predecessor's level of spending. I am confident that Ansonia will now return to the days of good, honest, legal advice offered for the best interest of its citizens and adherence to the law rather than serving any political purposes. So this is not about politics. This is about what's doing right for the city. When nobody's getting their pockets lined, nobody's getting jobs, none of that stuff. That's all gone. Personal sacrifice. On a personal note, the mayor should lead by example. Therefore, I have refused the issuance for a city credit card for my use as mayor. I will never have one. I am paying for ceremonial items like hot cocoa for our children at Christmas, Christmas wreaths, pencils, which I hear on Facebook they want to know who paid for that. I paid for that. Handouts for career day, decorations for events are all coming out of either my pocket or my wife Paula's pocket. She's a decorator. The budget since my accountant wants me to keep track, I can report that as of last week, I have personally spent more than $1,200 for city expenses out of my own pocket. And I don't expect anything for it, but I want you to know that I don't have a budget. The budget normally allocated to the mayor's office was entirely spent down to zero when I took office, although 58% of the budget year remained. So what does that tell you about what's going on? When the finance payments on the current $51,641 mayoral vehicle at 8.5% interest expires this summer, at $1,632 a month interest and principal, I will not be ordering a new car at least for another year or two. And I will keep driving what we have at least for another year or two. There's no money in the budget. I took the $20,000 out for the car. So I'm not looking to, be Prince Charming, a Cadillac or something like that. And as I mentioned earlier, to our department heads and alders, I am calling for a zero increase in city and locally funded Board of Ed projects. We have to identify non-essential spending and find more efficient ways to deliver services. But let me make something painfully clear. We can neither tax nor cut our way out of this mess. We require a multifaceted strategy, as Tom pointed out, including some cuts, taxes, state assistance. Senator Cabrera, we need your help. And if Kara's here, we need her help. Refinancing debt that can be legally accomplished in a fiscally responsible manner. And you will be informed how we make out along the way, especially with the restructuring of the what's that? Not the budgeting process, but the fuel cell. That's the big thorn on our side. I'm sorry, there's no more Zoom-only meetings designed to limit public knowledge and hide the ugly truth. City Hall is a busy place and will remain busy over the next months as good people, not only the Board of Aldermen good people, but the people like Mr. Norman over there and several people on boards, Mr. Thayer, who work, help with the city. They're great people and they care about the city. So they're gonna help us get out of this mess. So I thank you and all the people that volunteer on boards. I'm not gonna start going around. If it wasn't for you people, we'd be in deeper trouble. So thank you for what you do and the time you put in. So I don't have too much more. Our strategy to bridge this gap will be transparent and it will be responsible. Strict expenditure control, reducing all non-essential spending across every department. Anyone in the City Hall knows I push back on anything that comes across my desk. Some things I can't control because they happen before me, but I do push back. Revenue growth, increasing local fees and aggressively pursuing federal investment tax credit and state aid. We are looking at fees we're charging. We haven't raised parking fees for 3 organizations downtown since 2004, so we're going to do that. And we have received some blight money that hasn't been collected. It's not a lot of money. Now when you're talking millions of dollars, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Project recovery, we will seek a negotiated solution to put the fuels, which we're doing, back on track and use short-term financing to delay the immediate budgetary impact. That's what Tom talked about, financing that, so we don't go into trouble. We don't go into a bond situation where a bond is reduced, because we didn't pay a bond because we don't have the money. So that's what we're looking to do. Any non-recurring revenue, as Tom mentioned, from asset sales or fund closeouts will be used over a multi-year period to avoid future shortfalls. State assistance. My team is working closely with Governor Lamont, Senator Cabrera, Representative Rochelle, to achieve any and all state assistance that we can do, that we can get to get us through this crisis. That's going on right now. I did not create this mess, nor did you, but together we have to meet the challenge. I'm determined to fix it. I'm not going to kick the can down the road for the purpose of the next election. I could kick this down the road, folks, and I'll get reelected again. I know just how to do it.
Period, yes.
I'm not gonna do that.
That's
So if I don't get reelected, that's fine. But I'm determined to fix it, and I don't want the next generation to deal with this.
Amen.
I'm instructing my staff to work with Town Clerk Beth Lynch. Actually, Andrew, you keep getting brought up. To post a presentation on the website. We will notify the public and hold budget workshops at City Hall to walk through these numbers line by line. So the budget, we're going to have meetings and we're going to go line by line. And thank you for you people on both, because that is very painful and very time consuming. So I ask for your patience, your understanding, and your partnership. And if we face this honestly, Ansonia will not just survive the storm, we will emerge stronger, more disciplined, and with our fiscal integrity restored. So we go back to work tomorrow. It was a long day today. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
So be it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.